Welcome to the Time to Practice podcast. This is a space where we talk about music practice, the ups and downs that young musicians go through related to practice and learning music, and how we as parents, caregivers, and music educators can support the young musicians in our lives, support ourselves, and support each other. My name is Christine Goodner. I'm a music educator, author, and podcaster who has made it my mission to talk about music practice and to support educators and families looking to make home practice more effective and to reduce conflict and frustration in the practice room. I'm glad you're here. This episode is brought to you by my upcoming SAA enrichment course, Setting Families Up for Success, which starts on January 9th, 2026. On Friday mornings, we'll meet every other week for 4 sessions, and I'd love to have you join me. Rather than hear me talk about the course, here's a word about it from frequent guest of the podcast, Barbie Wong.
Christine's course really helps the teacher build a foundation so that the parents have the tools that they need for things like everyday practice, for support with music lessons, and for times when things are difficult. And Christine helps guide the teachers through all of that so that as a teacher, we can feel like we know what to do in those difficult times. I think every teacher needs to take Christine's course.
If you're a Suzuki teacher, I would love to have you join me for that. You are listening to episode 109. I'm recording this episode in early December 2025, and this is a busy time of year for musicians, for educators, and for families alike. And it can be easy when we're super busy in periods of time like this to get a little burnt out or feel a little crispy around the edges or lose sight of our joy and our motivation a bit because there's so much to do and to think about. And I am right there with you if you're feeling a bit this way right now, whenever you're listening to this. And so I have been trying to focus on what is keeping the joy alive for me right now, what is keeping me energized, and what I am doing this year at this time of year that's keeping my energy up and keeping me away from that edge of feeling burnt out that I know can creep up on me in busy times like this. So, I am going to share with you 6 different things that are keeping me energized and engaged this fall into the early winter as a teacher, as a musician, in my creative life. And these are super personal to me and my own music life, even if your list would be completely different. I hope listening to my list helps spark you to think about what can help you incorporate fun, joy, novelty, or interest into your musical life or that with your children whenever you listen to this episode. The first thing keeping me inspired this fall was a wonderful live concert series that I got to see in November. My husband and I got to attend a really fun creative event put on by the Oregon Symphony and 45th Parallel Universe here in Portland, which was a concert crawl featuring the complete string quartets of the living composer Carolyn Shaw. And there were 3 short, hour-long or slightly less concerts in 3 very different venues around the city, featuring her music was a smaller audience than would typically be at, say, an Oregon Symphony performance in the big hall. And it felt like we were up close and personal with the musicians. And the composer was there herself. She sang. She's a Pulitzer Prize winning composer for at least one of her vocal works. I'm sure she has many other awards that I am not mentioning here, but she spoke a bit and we heard so many of her works performed by string quartet that day. And it was absolutely an inspiring day that really reminded me why I love music so much, the importance of seeing live music to spark our interest and motivation, and how much I admire composers. That is not how my brain works at all. And there was just something about sitting a few feet away from the composer while so many of their works was performed that felt like a really special treat. So I am still inspired thinking about that concert and talking to you about it now. That was a big one on my list. And of course, that's one example of what a live music experience could be like. And I know sometimes for me, it's hard to get out of the house. My introvert self can feel like there's a lot going on in life. I'd rather introvert at home a bit since I have a very social job. But seeing great music performed live is always something I'm glad to have witnessed and been a part of. And I can't encourage you enough in the near future to look for your own version of this. Whatever live music is offered in your community that you can go and see, whether it's during this busy holiday season we're in now when I'm recording this, or in the new year. But I would look into what's happening in your community, maybe ask your teacher for advice on what's going on. And there's often low cost and free community concerts around us to attend if we know where to look for them. So for me, that live experience is, I think, going to stick with me for a very long time. In the practice realm is my next two things keeping me inspired and engaged right now. There are two kinds of practice I'm incorporating that are keeping me going into the practice room and staying motivated. And often when we teach as music educators, life is busy with our work tasks and our teaching job, and our own practice can take a lot of creativity and planning to get done. And so, first on my list of what's keeping me engaged in my practicing is rehearsing with a friend. My friend Sherry is a pianist, and we often play together. And when we get together to practice, we often have social time first and get to chat and catch up, and then we get to work on some music together. And that social peer practice for me is so valuable, especially when I know we're going to get together to practice. It gets me into the practice room to prepare my music. And I often have a clear idea of what targeted or specific practice I want to do next after we've rehearsed and I've seen what's gone well and what could use a little more, smoothing out on my part. So for me, that is one friendship around music practice that really makes a difference for me. And it could be really helpful to have a social, a buddy or peer practice situation for your own child if you're a parent listening. Practice can be lonely sometimes, and it's wonderful to have a grown up and parent helping us with practice. And I think it adds an element of fun and socialness to our practice when we have somebody our own age, a peer, could even be a teenager that comes and practices with our child, once in a while. But having that social aspect to practice can really keep practice engaging and motivating. My other keep practice in my daily schedule strategy that's adding some joy right now. I might have mentioned once before on the podcast, but violinist and educator Kara Eubanks inspired me with her sharing of her ADHD joy practice sessions on Instagram. And I have started incorporating short, intense practices on a balance board into my day. And I have both a round, flat balance board and a U shaped balance board that I actually got that one after hearing her talk about hers. And there's just something for me personally about how practicing on it gets my brain and body in sync and makes me very happy to practice in that way. And I might only start out my practice on it and, you know, climb down after a little bit of practice, or I might do the whole thing. It depends on the day. But I think, especially if I know I quote, should practice and I do have time and I'm really having trouble getting myself started, this is a really great way for me to ease into getting started with practice because it adds the element of fun and joy to my playing. I realize this isn't a practical tip for every instrument, of course. And this is again my personal little list. But I think all of us can think about how do we add a little fun and joy into our practice right now. And maybe you have something that's adding joy to your practice or that's adding joy to your child's practice. I would love to hear it. Maybe we could do a little future episode of all about tips that listeners have shared for adding fun and joy into their practice in small ways. The next two things keeping me engaged in teaching and music making right now is learning and trying out new ideas. And as a Suzuki trained teacher, one of the things I love about the Suzuki teaching culture is a real emphasis on being a lifelong learner and constantly thinking about new ideas and trying out new ideas. And I know personally that keeps me from getting into a rut and it keeps teaching interesting for me and making music exciting for me. It's, I sort of have a laboratory that I can try out exciting new ideas in as I work with my students. So there's two ways that I feel like I did this successfully this fall. I took an enrichment class with piano teacher trainer Merlin Thompson about 21st century teaching. And it was full of food for thought about how we teach and why we teach in certain ways and sort of the history of teaching and learning and why what we might want to keep and what we might want to change. And I found it very mentally stimulating to think about this and discuss it in class. Kept my brain lit up with new ideas and thinking, and I really incorporated that in my teaching in new ways and thought about a lot of what we discussed as I was teaching throughout my week in between classes. So I think that was something that really kept me engaged. I am already looking forward in January. I'm going to be taking an online course about understanding and supporting executive function skills. And I know that's going to help me do very much the same thing. I realized not everyone would find taking a new class as, motivating, as exciting as I do, but I do know that about myself, and so I like to put myself in that situation and build it into my business expenses for the year, a budget to take a couple of classes and, whenever I can, so I can be the best teacher and most engaged teacher possible. There are many also low or no cost ways to create a personal project around learning like this. And you could find some books to read on a certain topic from your local library, for example. So that is very similar to the other project I'm doing this school year to keep myself engaged. I have read Dr. Molly Gebrian's fantastic book about the neuroscience of practice, and I love it. And I also think the ideas in this book take some experimentation and some time to like mull over and sit with and absorb, especially to make them practically applicable to my own practice and teaching life. So I am taking a chapter at a time, about a month each or so, and I'm reading it. I'm also listening to it in audiobook format, and then I am trying out some of the ideas from the chapter in my own teaching and playing, just one at a time. And it could take me more than this school year to get through each chapter as in depth as I'm planning to. I feel like I'm really studying it slowly like a textbook, and I'm really loving the process and the deep learning opportunity it's giving me. I realize this is a very nerdy way to stay inspired, but I am finding it really interesting, and I really love looking for new ideas that could help my students and myself in practice as a side project too. So those are two ways I'm learning new things, incorporating them into my teaching to stay engaged. You may have your own way that you like to take in new information. It could be watching documentaries, it could be reading books, it could be listening to podcasts. There's a lot of different ways to get some new information in, and I think my message to you would just to be to think of what can you do that helps you learn or keeps you inspired and then just lights you up and makes you excited to do what you're doing. If my little list that I just gave you related to learning feels like it would be exhausting, then I think probably you want to pick something else. But there are ways that we can incorporate new ideas and keep ourselves interested and learning new things all the time. And then finally, number 6, I wanted to do a fun creative project with my studio's recital this fall. And so I was inspired by my friend and friend of the podcast, Claire Allen, who came on this past summer. We put on that Supporting Perfectionists and Perfectionist Thinking series. And I turned, based on seeing her do the same and seeing her pictures and feeling very inspired, our fall recital into a candlelight concert that are very popular right now, and it was really fun. I had all sorts of LED, battery powered candles in the front of the church. I'm happy to share a photo. I've shared one on my Instagram before, and it made it so beautiful and magical in our recital space. Gave a lot of joyful sparkle to the fall recital for me, for sure, and I think for many of the students and families who came to watch as well. I think having routines and knowing exactly what to expect at recitals can actually be really wonderful and help students feel relaxed and at ease, and I try to do that most of the time, but I also think from time to time, having something different and extra special as part of the recital can help keep them engaging and exciting to put on and participate in. So that was my thinking about this kind of recital this year. It could be a whole podcast to talk about the logistics of putting this on, but if you would like to do this with your students, I'm happy to share what I learned from putting it on. I would imagine Claire Allen is happy to speak with you as well if you're connected with her. And you could do your own mini version of this in a small group class or ensemble rehearsal with the lights dimmed or off and a lot of LED candles around the room, or a special home concert or practice session all by candlelight. There's something that feels just magical about playing music by candlelight, I think, especially this time of year where I live. It gets very dark early in the day, and there's just a cozy feeling to playing by candlelight that feels really fun and interesting. And then I think I would be leaving out a big one if I didn't add a bonus number 7 to our list of the ways that keeps my music life interesting and engaging for me. And that is just this podcast, talking to guests, turning on the microphone and talking to each one of you here listening, reading books written by guests to prepare for interviews, and putting together ideas to share with you. I hope it helps stay engaged and interested and thinking of new ideas. And I know for sure it helps me to do the same thing and examine my own ideas and think about what I want to change or update or share. So I think I also always am thinking about the challenges that families like you, if you're practicing with your kids, might be having with music practice. And is there any information I could share that would help? That keeps things exciting and engaging for me as I both give talks to groups and also teach my own students in my studio. So there are my list of 6 or 7 things right now keeping my music life inspiring. Seeing live music, especially inspiring live performances, having a social way to practice, my balance board practice and incorporating joy into my practice sessions, taking a class and learning from someone else and incorporating those ideas, reading a book in depth and applying the practice ideas to my practice and my work with my students, and putting together a creative recital experience for my students, and this podcast, creating this to share with each one of you. What would you put in your top 3 to 6 ways that you're keeping your own practice or musical life fun or engaging in your own way? How are you helping keep things inspiring for your child if you practice with them or have a child who practices independently in your house? And how could you help them discover what that would be for themselves? I would love to hear your ideas and what's working for you. You can send me an email, Christine@SuzukiTriangle.com, or connect with me on Instagram @SuzukiTriangle. Music is such a gift in each of our lives. It's sometimes easy to get bogged down in the shoulds and musts and obligations involved, but really many of us get into and fall in love with music for what it gives us: connection to ourselves and to others, joy, feeling alive, feeling connected to beauty, being a part of something bigger than ourselves, and so many more things we could all think of and list. I think reflecting on how we are connecting to that from time to time is really valuable to keep ourselves engaged and to remember why we want to keep doing this and having music in our lives. Before we go today, I would love to invite you to stay connected. Subscribe to the podcast through your favorite podcast player. Sign up for my monthly newsletters where I share resources and practice tips and ideas, both my own and those from the wider music community. You can find that on my website, SuzukiTriangle.com/newsletter. And if you're looking for your own class to continue learning as a teacher in the new year, join me for Setting Families Up for Success, which is a 10-hour enrichment course offered through the SAA starting on January 9th. I will put a link to all of these resources in the show notes. And I want to thank you very much for listening. Have a wonderful week, everyone, and take good care.